forward. All right, so I encourage everyone, students, please turn on your video if you can, so we can show Gabriella that we are here to engage with her and, you know, just, I know we're virtual, but show her the same appreciation we would if we were in person. So I'm going to hand it over to Gabriella and let her take the stage.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I do have a presentation for you, so we'll go ahead and get right into that. I will be pausing at the end of each slide, so if you have any questions, go ahead and say them then, or if you type them into the chat, Jessica said she'll go ahead and make sure that we get to those as well. And then if there's other questions at the end, we do have some time for extended questions or discussion at the end as well. Alrighty. Alrighty, so my name is Gabriella Ware. I am currently pursuing my doctorate of physical therapy at Western Carolina University. I did graduate from UNC Charlotte with a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science and a minor of Spanish in 2018. And before that, I got a 2-year degree from St. Cloud State University in my home state of Minnesota. So when you're thinking about going to PT school, you want to start with, is physical therapy the right career for you? So something to ask yourself would be, why physical therapy and not another healthcare career like a physician's assistant or going to med school or a nurse or a chiropractor or anything like that? That's something that is very important to think about, because if your reason for physical therapy is, I want to help people, those other professions help people as well. And you're going to need to be able to nail down why this career versus another one, not only for yourself to keep you driving forward as you hit challenges with school or the career, but also to be able to convey to physical therapy schools why you really want physical therapy and not something else. So some other things I would say in this realm is start learning about you. What do you value in a workplace and in your work? What's going to drive and motivate you in school, outside of school, in your career? What are things you absolutely want to avoid or minimize in your day-to-day? So for example, for me, when I graduated, I wasn't totally sure about PT school anymore because I thought, well, maybe I want to work in a study abroad office. I had the opportunity to work in the Career Center in undergrad. I thought maybe, what about that? What about corporate wellness or physical therapy? And for me, a big thing was I absolutely didn't want to sit at a desk or be in front of a computer for a long period of time. And so I wanted to work with people. I wanted to be hands-on with people. I wanted to be moving and teaching people to move. And it really came down to physical therapy was going to be the one that allowed me to do that more than some of the other things I was interested in. Another thing is, what kind of lifestyle do you want to lead? So for example, physical therapy and athletic training can be kind of similar, but the lifestyles are going to be very, very different. If you're an athletic trainer, you're going to work a lot of hours. It's going to be a lot of weekends and evenings. You might have an early morning schedule and then have your day off and then work again in the evening. Whereas physical therapy, it's going to be much more similar to a 9-to-5, or you might work 4 10-hour shifts, sometimes on the weekend, sometimes in the week. It's just all going to depend. So those are things you all want to think about. Some ways you can learn about the career would be through informational interviews, both for people in physical therapy and in other similar professions, so that you can compare and contrast, ask your questions, figure out what the pros and cons of them are. And then I can't emphasize enough shadowing if you get the opportunity to, so that you can see what a day in the life of a physical therapist really is like. Any questions on that one before we move on? Okay. So the next thing I would say is, once you know PT school is right for you, you want to prepare you for PT school. So this all comes down to your mindset and your habits. And the number one is stop comparing yourself. Stop comparing yourself to other people, what other people say the standard should be. Figuring out what works for you for studying, for gaining experience isn't always going to be the same as what works for everybody else, and vice versa. So finding what works for you. So don't try to find the person who you think you should study like, or the person that you think you should be like. Find what works best for your learning style, for your skills, and you can always integrate pieces of what other people do, but don't try to copy somebody else, and don't try to compare yourself as being better or worse than somebody else. It is competitive to get into PT school, but once you're in PT school, all of these people are going to be your coworkers. They're going to be your comrades in school. You want to be able to really work with them, and then in the future in the field with them as well, not compete with them, but rather collaborate with them. And then you really want to work on your time management skills. PT school is really hard. You're going to need to learn how to manage your workflow, prioritize projects, assignments, and take care of yourself. So it would be better to figure this out now in undergrad or during a gap year, and then be able to continue to refine that skill, versus going through undergrad and maybe you had to work on it, maybe you didn't, maybe your schedule wasn't that bad, maybe it's pretty challenging. But if you haven't developed this skill by the time you get to PT school, you're really going to struggle. So work on that skill. Self-care is going to be really important. You want to learn what stress management strategies work for you. You don't want to just go until you burn out. You really need to be able to mitigate that and do things along the way to keep yourself in top shape, both mentally and physically. And then another thing is get comfortable with ambiguity. I cannot count the number of times my professors have answered a question with "it depends," because it depends on the patient, it depends on the presentation, it depends on the other factors in their life that might be affecting their health condition. There's never a hard and fast answer. So getting comfortable with being able to think flexibly about all of those different things is going to be really important as well. So another thing I would say, biggest thing, challenge yourself. Become the most well-rounded human you can be. Many of the skills you'll gain by doing new and challenging things are going to help you relate to people and help you stand out when you get to the PT school application process. So this could be academically, this could be putting yourself in brand new situations, maybe with venture or doing the high ropes course or some of those outdoor things. This could be trying a new club or a new job or an intramural sport. This could be exposing yourself, doing study abroad, anything like that that will challenge you and put you in a situation where you're uncomfortable, where you'll have the opportunity to grow. Those are going to be really important things for you to do in preparing yourself for PT school, more so than what the specific thing you're doing that's challenging you is. So now you know you want to go to PT school. Are there any questions before we move on? Sorry. Okay. So what schools are a good fit for you? Now that you know that you want to go to PT school, how do I figure out what the best school is? So something to think about is cost. Private schools are going to generally be more expensive than public schools, so that's something you're going to want to take into account. The number of scholarship opportunities, graduate assistantship opportunities are going to vary greatly depending on the program, so that's something to look into. And then also out of state versus in-state, because in-state isn't always going to be less expensive than out of state. So for a personal example, I come from Minnesota. I was a Minnesota resident, and the least expensive school in Minnesota was going to be about 80 to 90,000 total for the 3 years, just in tuition and fees. And so that was in-state tuition. Out of state would have been higher than that. And so I was able to find a school in Wisconsin that would give me Wisconsin's in-state tuition through reciprocity. That would have been about 50,000 for the whole 3 years. So that was an example of moving states and it actually being less expensive. And then North Carolina, for me, this school that I'm going to in particular, Western Carolina University, would have been equal or slightly less than the Minnesota in-state, even though I would have been paying out-of-state tuition in North Carolina. Another thing to keep in mind is depending on the state that you're looking at going to, you might be able to get residency after your first year of grad school as well, because it works a little bit different for grad school than it does for undergraduate. So I am an out-of-state student at Western Carolina University this year, but I followed some steps and I was able to get, or will be able to get, in-state residency for the last 2 years, and several people in the cohort above me have been able to do the same thing. So just something to keep in mind. Other things would be location and environment. Are you somebody who really thrives in a big city, or are you somebody who would rather be in a small town or more rural situation? So for example, if somebody really loved maybe being in Charlotte or really loved being in Chicago, and that's what they wanted to do, that's the environment they loved, they might not like living in Cullowhee where I live right now. It's, 10 minutes to a Walmart, it's about 10 miles, it's very small, it's tiny town, very homogeneous populations. There's not a lot of diversity here, but I'm very close to the outdoors. So the outdoors was like really what drew me here. So kind of think of those pros and cons, what you like, what you don't like. Look at the cost of living. Cost of living is going to vary greatly by city, by state, by where you are. So those are things to take into account when you're looking at what the cost of the overall education would be. Even if the program is really low, if the cost of living is really high, that's going to factor into your overall cost of education as well. And then what are the housing options? Some places might not have any student housing, like student housing complexes. You might need just general housing with everybody else. So you might have to sort through that. If you're somebody who wants housing where, you know, it's a 4-bedroom apartment and I'm going to have roommates, but I don't have to worry about finding those roommates. It's whatever the apartment complex puts in there. So I'm not responsible for the cost of the entire apartment itself. If my roommate moves out, that might be something that you would want to take into account as well. And then programmatic differences. So programs vary widely in the curriculum sequence and focus. So everybody's going to have certain things that they have to meet in order to be able to be accredited. But beyond that, they have a fair bit of leeway. So some curriculums, some programs have all of your anatomy and physiology in 8 weeks in the summer, and then they move on. The program that I'm in has us doing anatomy and physiology side by side with other coursework for an entire 2 semesters. So that was something that was pretty different. Our program doesn't do a lot of research. We do have research that we fall under a faculty member for in the 2nd year for doctoral projects, but we're not leading independent research projects. And that's not something that our university really has for the students. Our university is really focused on producing us as clinicians versus clinicians and researchers. So that's just something to take into account as well. And then some universities will use a more holistic approach to their application cycle, and some will have a lot more numbers-based selection process. The interview will always be a more holistic part of the process, but some universities may say hard cutoff for GPA, hard cutoff for GRE, hard cutoff for this, and you have to get past all of that to get in, to get the interview. Other ones, those will still play a part, but they might not be as hard and fast, and I'll be looking more at the big picture of the student. So those are just things to take into consideration as well. Any questions there? All right. So now you've looked at your schools, you've figured all of that out, you've narrowed down to the schools you want to apply to. How do you stand out when you're actually applying? So get experience and skills would be a first one. Work experience does not have to be specific to PT. A lot of people tend to think, I need to get a job as a physical therapy technician. That's the only way I'm going to get into PT school. I just have to do it. A lot of people do that. So as long as you have the minimum number of hours, if the school is requiring that for shadowing hours, whether that's work experience or just observation hours, beyond that, the PT tech thing doesn't necessarily make you have an advantage. Get work experience that will have you get skills, working with people, being able to talk to different people, being able to do all of those things. My work experience was working at the Career Center and then working in a chiropractic clinic. So at the Career Center, I got a lot of experience working one-on-one with students, mentoring them, getting feedback, giving feedback, doing public speaking. And then in the chiropractic clinic I worked at, I had a lot more experience. This was after my undergraduate. So I worked for 2 years after undergraduate. And I got a lot of experience working with a chiropractic doctor and then working with a patient to do exercise instruction. Some of my classmates worked as CNAs. Some of them worked in the nutrition field. Some of them worked as personal trainers. Some of them didn't do anything in the health and wellness field. Some of them worked in an office before this, doing administrative things. So really get the experience working with people, get your observation hours, but it doesn't have to be PT technician. And when you're thinking about this, think what kind of skills make a good clinician. So if you were to go as a patient to a physical therapy office, what kind of person would you want to see? What would that clinician look like? What makes them a good PT? Something to consider is soft skills, being able to relate to people from all walks of life. Find a way to build those skills, because you're going to go to PT school and they're going to teach you the technical skills. They're going to teach you to think like a PT. Learn the soft skills and be able to use those in the clinic. you do need to work on your GPA. Most schools are going to have a minimum GPA for application. A lot of them will consider both courses in your GPA if you have to retake a course. So you got a C or a D in it the first time and then an A in it the other time. That's going to kind of balance out. They're not just going to take the second one. Some schools will, but some won't. So that's something to look into when you're applying. Some schools will weigh that GPA more than others, like I mentioned earlier, with the numbers versus the holistic process. If you need help and support, there are resources on campus. There's tutoring, academic advising, and your academic advisor or a professor should be able to direct you to those other resources if that's something that you're needing as well. And then look at quality over quantity with experiences. You don't want to overextend yourself by being involved with all of the things all at once, but not being super involved with them. Don't just get involved in a club to have one more thing on your resume because you think it's going to look good. Because they may ask you in the interview, hey, tell me about what you did with this. And if it was, I went to a meeting once a month or once a semester and that was all I was involved, that's not going to be very meaningful to them. Find things that are meaningful to you and then get really involved with those and show your passion for those things. And then as you're doing this, remember you're looking into the school and what they're all about. Are they a good fit for you? And are you a good fit for them? And then you will really stand out by being able to align, here's my skills, here's my interests, here's the things I've done, here's why it fits with your mission, here's why it fits with your goal of the type of student you want to recruit, the type of clinician you want to produce. And this sounds a lot like what you would do if you were doing a job interview. So the Career Center can really help you nail down how to do this, how to figure out what schools are a good fit, the same what you would apply the same skills you would if you were looking for a job at a company.
I'm sorry, I wanted to ask a question. I know you typically ask your questions after each slide. I know you covered GPA, but how do some PT schools view withdrawals?
So it would not count into your GPA, and I think if you were, it would depend on the school, but if you were to withdraw from 1 or 2 courses, probably not a big deal, especially if it's not a prerequisite course. Even if it is a prerequisite course, depending on the school, again, it would probably be better to, if you were, like say, going to fail the course, probably better to withdraw. If you were going to get a B in the course, just get the B in the course. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
All righty. So the application requirements that I'm going to go over next are general. I looked at my school. I pulled from what schools were requiring when I went through this process, but it is not hard and fast. There are variations of this. I will direct you back to PTCAS and to the individual programs websites to nail down exactly which prerequisites and requirements are for your school. So PTCAS is the Physical Therapy Centralized Application Service. So almost every program in the country uses PTCAS, but not every single one does. So with PTCAS, you would put in a lot of your basic information. So like what school you went to, your coursework, your resume, your activities, leadership, letters of recommendation, all of those things are going to go onto PTCAS. And then usually the things that are unique to the program are going to be the essays. And so you would tailor those to the school or the specific schools, but your PTCAS application, and then there's a general essay that goes with PTCAS, should not be tailored to a specific school unless you're only applying to one school, because that's going to go out to all of the schools. And then the graduate school application. So not every university is going to do this. Mine did. I had to apply through PTCAS to the university program, but then I also had to apply to the grad school in general, not the PT program, but the grad school at Western Carolina University. And I had to apply to both. So that would just be something to keep in mind. That was 2 fees, that was 2 separate applications. If I had missed that second application, the grad school application, my application would not have been considered. So do read the PTCAS page for the university as well as the website page on the university's website itself for all of those requirements. And then the application specialist for each program should be able to clarify any questions you would have as well. So emailing them is always great. And then you do want to tailor your essays that are university specific. Make sure you are answering the question that's asked and staying on topic, because that's something that a lot of people can kind of get sidetracked. I really want to talk about this experience that I had, but if it's not answering the question, then you're not going to score high on that essay because you weren't actually addressing what they were asking, even if you had a really amazing experience to share. And then you do need a bachelor's degree to apply. You can be finishing your bachelor's degree when you apply, as long as you do have it done before you would matriculate into the DPT program. And I've major in question mark here because there's a little bit of a misconception that I have to have a kinesiology or an exercise science major to get into PT school. I chose to because I really enjoyed the coursework, and I found that a lot of the prerequisites were kind of in the major, but it is not a requirement at all. As long as you have a bachelor's degree and you have all of the prerequisite coursework done, you are good. Prerequisite coursework, a lot of times it's okay to have 1 to 2 outstanding courses, meaning either in progress or yet to be taken at the time of your application, as long as you show a plan to complete them. That is a part of the PT-CAS application, is what's your current coursework, what have you already finished, and then what do you have planned for the next 2 semesters if you're still in school. And there's going to be a progress update that if you were to get accepted, your matriculation into the program would be contingent on you finishing all of those courses. So if you did, say, withdraw from your last prerequisite and it was your spring semester as a senior and you didn't finish it that summer and you didn't graduate, even though you were accepted, you wouldn't be able to go to that program. They would withdraw the acceptance from you if that happens. So just make sure you get all of your prerequisite coursework done. They do vary by school. So again, check the PT-CAS and the individual school's website. I've listed the most common ones here. It's going to be 2 semesters of chemistry, physics, biology, human anatomy, all with their labs. You're gonna have to take 1 to 2 psychology courses generally. Sometimes there's a sociology in there. You may have to take medical terminology. Not every program requires it, some do. Statistics is in there. And then exercise physiology is becoming more common, but not required by all universities. So that's something to consider. With the psychology, I have noted here, because some universities will require abnormal psychology and some universities will not accept abnormal psychology. So this is another detail to pay attention to when you're looking at schools and planning your coursework, to make sure that you have all of the prerequisites for the universities that you want to go to. Some universities required organic chemistry. It was a chunk of them. A lot of them were up in the Chicago area. So for me, I knew I don't want to go to Chicago. I don't like big cities. And I don't want to do organic chemistry because it would be unique to a very few programs versus the large majority of the programs I'd be interested in. So I just opted to not look at those schools as ones I would apply to. But that's going to be different for everybody. So look at the ones you're interested in. And that's why I started with look at the schools you're interested in. From there, go down to the prerequisite coursework, because you don't want to take a lot of courses that aren't required for the schools that you actually end up wanting to apply to. And this is more application requirements. So there is a lot here. You're going to have to get 2 to 4 letters of recommendation. Do ask these people early. They're busy. You want to make sure that they have enough time to write a quality letter of application. And you do want to make sure that they have good things to say about you. So ask them before you put their information in. Don't just kind of spring it on them. That's not professional to do. It looks bad. And also they may come back and say, I'm not sure that I'm the best person, or I don't have the bandwidth to do this. So you wouldn't want to have them in there and then have them not do it and then you not be able to complete your application. And again, every school has a minimum GPA. Sometimes some schools may waive this if you're really close. That would be a conversation you would need to have with the application specialist. And then the GRE. So the GRE has been very commonly required for a very long time, and not all schools are requiring this. This is the first year that the program that I'm currently in is not requiring it for our program's application. So just something to look into before you assume I need this, I have to take it, let me go take it, and you spend a lot of time studying for it and paying the fee for it. So look ahead, make sure you know whether you're going to need it or not. If you do need it, make sure you study ahead for it, give yourself enough time to prepare. Observation hours is another requirement. Before COVID, almost every single program had a minimum requirement of number of hours and types of setting. It was usually at least two different settings, one outpatient, one inpatient, 20 hours in each. Some places would have a requirement of 100 hours. It just, again, depends on that school. So look ahead. That has been in the last few years waived due to a lot of hospitals, a lot of clinics not allowing observers in, but they are starting to look at bringing it back as some of the restrictions start to be winding down in different parts of the country. So make sure you check the schools that you're interested in and see what they're requiring, especially if you're not applying this year, but might be applying in a couple of years from now, they'll probably start requiring that again. A good way to do that is reaching out to the physical therapists themselves and asking about it, introducing yourself. You could reach out. A lot of hospitals are going to have a designated person, so you would have to go to the student section on the hospital's website and kind of research who that person is and contact them directly versus contacting a physical therapist. Those are just things to consider with that as well. Many universities are starting to require what's called the CASPER test. I don't remember what it stands for, but it is a situational judgment test. So what that was I had to watch a video or read a scenario that was a complicated interpersonal situation, or I had watched something happen, and it's what would you do next? What would you do in this situation? And it's free response. So you're going to have to be able to type your answer. So that's not something you can really study for, but if you were able to talk to an advisor, they might be able to give you some tips on how to prepare for that test. And then again, the details of requirements are going to vary by school. Make sure you check the ones that you are interested in. Any questions before we move on?
Gabby, I have a question. It's not particular about what you were going over, but more about like, when did you know that you wanted to apply to PT school?
Absolutely. So the first time I knew, or thought I knew, was as a freshman at UNC Charlotte. I was taking my first year of exercise science courses, and I really was enjoying the applied kinesiology course, learning about the movement of the body and the muscles and how it all went together and how changes in that would affect function for a person, either for good or for bad, and how we can have an impact on that. So I went through from freshman year through my undergraduate saying, I'm going to go to PT school and doing all of these things that I'm telling you guys to do as students so that I would be ready in the summer between junior and senior year to apply. And I really worked to be that well-rounded person I talked about earlier. I was working at the Career Center. I studied abroad. I did different things that I wanted to gain just life experience. And in the process of gaining that life experience, I had to take a step back junior year and go, I don't know that I want PT anymore, because I started to realize I love the things that the career counselors do. I love the things that the study abroad people do. I love maybe working in admissions because I'm really enjoying going and talking about my university to people. Now what? So I ended up not applying between junior and senior year. I ended up taking what was intended to be a year off. I actually, for a while, thought about walking away from PT school altogether. I did a Bible education program that was important to me to do in Texas for my church. And then I came home and I worked in a chiropractic office for 2 years. Within 2 weeks of that job, I knew I wanted to go back to PT school because the things I talked about, like the movement, I don't want to work in an office. I want to work on my feet, working with people, hands-on, all of those things. That was the moment for me when I was like, I love all of these other things, but this is what I want to do every day. And so I can still do those other things that I love, like with loving working in the Career Center. I got invited to do this presentation. I can still do those other things that I love, even if it's not what I would want to do every single day. So find what you love, make sure you know what you want to do. I didn't know after junior year. I took a step back because I was not able to say PT school is what I want to do. I'm ready to spend 3 grueling years in school and spend all this money to do it, maybe to find out partway through at the end it's not what I wanted. So that was why I took the time off, went to work, found out, yes, this is what I want to do, came back and did it. And now I have the motivation to carry me through, whereas maybe if I'd done this 3 years ago, I wouldn't have had that. that cover it?
Yes, great. Thank you so much.
All right, so some application strategies. I would say number one, get organized, prep your materials before you start PTCAS. So PTCAS this coming year, if you were to apply for this next cycle, is going to open tentatively June 15th. Don't start gathering materials on June 14th or June 15th. Make sure that you have these ready to go. Have your resume and your essays reviewed. The essays, you're not going to know what that is until the prompt comes from PTCAS, but make sure your resume is ready to go. It's updated. We've had somebody look over it. If you have done cover letters before, those can serve as a really great practice for doing essays. I would say familiarize yourself with PTCAS. Just explore the website, see what it looks like, figure out how to navigate it, create an account ahead of time. PTCAS will wipe everything between each application cycle, or most things anyway. So if you were to start your application and then stop it, or like try to get ahead before June 15th, most of that stuff is going to go away. So don't start inputting stuff until after it opens for the current cycle, but you can create an account and start getting familiar with the navigation of it so that you're ready to go. And then as you're going through undergraduate, document everything you do. Document the things you're involved with, document keep track of the people who've had an impact on you, things like that, so that when you go to write those essays, you go to input that on the activity section, because you can't just upload your resume. You actually have to put everything line by line into this PTCAS website. It takes a long time. It's tedious. It can get frustrating. Having everything there ready to go is going to make that a lot easier for you. Plan ahead. So ideally, you will have an idea of the schools you want to apply to, what their requirements were. You're going to have that all laid out ahead of you so that you can just start plugging this in by the time the application actually comes up. Reach out to those potential writers of letter of recommendation early. PTCAS and the programs do have specific requirements for which type of recommender this is. A lot of times they will require at least one physical therapist to write you a letter of recommendation and at least one professor. Sometimes they may have also a previous employer or an academic advisor. They're going to have requirements about who's okay or who they will accept writing one and who they won't. So make sure you take a look at that. And then if you need to take the GRE, do that earlier the better, so that if you decide you want to take it again, you can. Or ideally you studied and you're prepared and you get the score you want the first time. Pick a Casper test date as well early. Those are limited. So the way that works is you can't just take it online anytime you want. There's going to be specific days, specific times. So make sure you log in, make your Casper account, figure out what dates are available, sign up for that date, and then block that day so that you're able to actually take it. You'd hate to get all of your application done and then realize I didn't take Casper and I can't make the last date that's available, or there's no more dates available. And so I put all this work in my application and now I have to wait another year. Make yourself an application timeline and stick to it. So if you're somebody like me who either has to do it all at once or you're going to procrastinate, give yourself deadlines and make yourself do those deadlines. Do it in chunks. But whatever strategy is going to work for you with the timing, just make sure you have a plan and then get it done. And then there is going to be an interview for almost every program. Sometimes this is one-on-one. Sometimes this is a panel or a group interview. Our university uses the group interview strategy. Sometimes it's going to be via Zoom. So the biggest thing I can say is use the Career Center to practice. Your career advisor can do a mock interview with you. Jessica, are they still doing the mock interviews, like virtual ones as well?
Yes. So you can meet, we call them coaches now. So you can meet with your coach. You just log into HireNiner, set an appointment. You can do it in person or virtual. So yes, we still do those mock interviews and they are very helpful.
Excellent. Awesome. So yeah, if your university is going to do an interview, figure out which type of interview and do that type of mock interview. If you're going to do universities that are requiring one of each, or like two universities and each requires a different one, see if they'll let you do both types of mock interview. Just use them to practice, get the feedback, and then within this, know your why. That's what we started with at the very first slide, and be able to communicate that why for both physical therapy and for the specific school. So why for example, Western Carolina University versus Eastern Carolina University. What about this program makes you want to come here versus somewhere else? Those are going to be two important things that you're able to communicate within that interview. So,
Gabriella,
yeah.
Gabby, we have one question in the chat from Gary. Gary asked, how far ahead did you start researching and narrowing down your school?
Okay, so the first time I started freshman year, and I had spreadsheets that I changed several times as I changed my mind about where I might want to go, what I might want to do, all of those things. And then junior year, I walked away from it, didn't know what I wanted to do. So kind of think that like I had general ideas of what was required, kind of like you're getting from this presentation. I had those general requirements floating in my head the second time I came, but didn't know where. In that research, I had kind of found out that Texas had really inexpensive schools. And so I was like, okay, I've taken one gap year, I can take another gap year. And I was going to move to Texas to get residency for a year. So I would say I really started looking at this 2 years before I wanted to actually start school, because you're going to have to do your application over a year in advance before when you actually go. So for example, I started school in August of 2021. Yes, 2021. And I had to apply starting in July of 2020. So the application cycle is going to last a year. So you're going to need to look at this before that. So 1 to 2 years in advance, at least, of when you would want to start, 1 year in advance of when you would actually do the application, or at least several months in front of when you would want to do the application is what I would recommend. I ended up not moving to Texas because COVID started right when I was planning to move and get a new job. And I chose to stay living in Minnesota, where I had a consistent housing situation and consistent job, living with my parents and working at the clinic I'd already been at for a year. So that's why I ended up throwing that out and then finding Western Carolina and the school in Wisconsin. Did that get your question, Gary?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. It looks like is there another question in the chat? I have a bubble that says 2.
I just put thank you there too.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So then for the timeline, again, requirements are going to vary by school. You want to start early and often. Write practice essays, keep track of your shadowing. That's a big one. Schools, if they're requiring shadowing records, you're actually going to have a physical therapist verify that you did those shadowing hours. This is to prevent people from just saying, oh yeah, I shadowed here with so-and-so this many hours. So whether this is a sheet that you keep track of the hours and have them initial or sign and date every time you go or at the end of your length of time there, or whether this is an email address that you're able to input and contact them and say, hey, I need you to verify in PTCast this for me. Either one works. I would actually recommend getting their email and their signature, just in case, they might change jobs and their email might change or something like that between the time when you've shadowed and when you're actually applying. So just find a way to keep track of those records and get those verified. Program searching. Start this as early as you know physical therapy is the path for you, because you might in your research stumble across a school that's not where you originally thought, but seems like the perfect fit. Western Carolina is a long way from Minnesota, but once I found this program, I was like, this is where I want to go. It's in the outdoors. It's focused on really training clinicians very, very well. We have the anatomy that's a whole year long. We have a pro bono clinic that the students run and get involved with the community and giving PT under the direction of supervising clinicians as early as our first semester, first few weeks. We get to get exposure to the clinic. Those are all things that were important to me. I found this program and decided I wanted to go for it. PTCast again is going to open June 15th. Tentatively, that may shift by a week or so. Keep track of that on their website. Casper dates, I did try to look those up and see which ones were available. for physical therapy. It is actually going to depend on the university you're applying to, and those are TBD. They have not released those yet for this summer. GRE, set yourself a date, make a study plan and stick to it. And then school deadlines for the PT-CAS and the actual school's website application are usually going to be between September and December, but check the school's website. The ones for the programs I was interested in, I actually got accepted to one before the deadline even was for the other program to finish the application. So there's a big difference, especially depending on when the program's start date is. The Wisconsin school was going to start June 1st, and the Western Carolina program didn't start until mid-August. So a couple more things to keep in consideration, as well as when that program is actually going to start, when you're going to have to be ready to move, when you're going to have to be ready to get housing. And then again, just keep in mind, this is a year-long application cycle. So if you started your application this summer, the early you would be applying for starting in 2023, whether that be June or August or even January maybe of 2024. So it is a year long in advance. You can't apply now and start this fall. So just keep that in mind when you're planning when would I want to go to PT school. Awesome. And that kind of brings us to the end of what I have prepared. I have listed links to some of the websites that I mentioned today. So Physical Therapist Centralized Application Service, or PT-CAS, Casper is on here, and GRE is on here. And then I want to give a shout out to my classmate, Ruby Dixon. She's not here with us today, but she did contribute to some of the material on this. She and I have had a lot of conversations about what we would say to somebody who is interested in going to PT school, what our different processes of getting here were like. She is a first-generation college student. She's also a parent. She has 3 children. And she said, if you had questions about either of those things or being neurodivergent, what's it like to go to school with ADHD, grad school, how do you navigate that? How do you navigate maybe some financial challenges? She would be the person to ask all of those questions too, and you can feel free to email her after this with any questions like that. Just mention, hey, I was a student that was at this presentation that Gabby gave. I have some questions for you. And then also after the fact, if you have any questions that we don't get to today or that come up after this presentation, after the session is over, please feel free to send me an email as well, and I'd be happy to get back to you with that. And then you should have access to this presentation in a PDF format and the recorded video afterwards as well.
All right, thank you, Gabby. So now we're going to open it up to some Q&A. So if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question to Gabby directly, you could do that or type it in the chat and we will look at those questions. So now's the time to ask those questions to Gabby, and she has a lot of great information. So ask away. And while you guys are thinking, I'll ask her some questions that I thought of. So Gabby, well, there's one message. Oh, it's from Adana. They ask, what kept or keeps you motivated?
That is a good one. I spent some time visualizing what kind of life I wanted to have, who I saw myself being, and what I saw myself being, and what I see myself doing. So what kind of character traits do I want to have? What kind of people do I admire? What do they do? What kind of physical therapist do I want to be? What kind of eventually wife and mom do I want to be? Things like that. And visualizing that gives me a target to shoot at. So when I am in the middle of the semester, like right now, where we've got exams every week until the last 2 weeks of class, we've got tons of projects due, life is kind of crazy and stressful, and I just want to take a nap and not do school, and maybe just not do school ever again. Thinking of those things, visualizing what I have in my mind of the kind of person I want to be and where that person is has helped me figure out, okay, what habits do I need to build? What kind of choices do I need to make today to get to be that person? And that's how I keep myself motivated when I'm having those hard times. It doesn't mean that I never lose motivation and have a day where I do just take a nap. It just means the nap is short, or I wake up the next day and I don't take a nap and then I get back on track. So you will kind of struggle with that sometimes. I struggle with that sometimes, but having that thing that you visualize to get you back on track is going to be important. You're welcome.
So Gabby, there's another question in the chat from Gary. In your research of PT schools, did you notice some programs that have more than one start date?
Some bigger programs may. I don't remember any off the top of my head, but those are going to be fewer and far between, if that makes sense. A lot of them, it's going to be a cohort that takes every class together for the entire 3 years and is in step, meaning, or lockstep. So you all take the same classes, you all have to pass those classes, and then you move on to the next semester together. So it's usually a pretty fixed begin date and end date. And there may be a few out there who might have like an August start date and a January start date, but again, those are going to be pretty far and few between.
Gabby, I know you mentioned your study abroad. Could you give a little bit more information about that? And then I know from meeting with some students and talking with them that they do want to do the study abroad, but they kind of have like these like thoughts of, oh, it's going to be too expensive, or, you know, I don't have time for that. Could you talk about some of those topics?
Yes, absolutely. So I did have the benefit of coming in with some already done classes before I came to UNC Charlotte. So that did give me a little bit of extra time, and I was able to apply for some scholarships. I had some scholarships that helped pay for some of it. If you go to the university scholarship application website, I'm not sure what that's called anymore at UNC Charlotte, but there is a portal. You can apply to scholarships through it. There are several that are specific and unique to study abroad. I was able to apply for one of those, which helped pay for part of my semester in Chile. And so that was a semester. I did do that. I had arranged my course schedule from freshman year on to, I very heavily packed other semesters to be able to do this. So I took chemistry and physics and biology all in one semester and a psychology course so that I could study abroad. So that was a very heavy semester, but it paid off in me being able to do this thing that I really wanted to do. So kind of weigh the pros and cons of how you might do that, or how you might need to navigate your course schedule. Your academic advisor would be the person to help you figure that out. But then also different study abroad programs are going to have different course offerings. So if you can get creative, you might still be able to do this even if there's a course you absolutely have to take in that semester. So for example, could you take psychology online from UNC Charlotte while you're studying abroad with another university? That would be a conversation to have with your academic advisor and with the study abroad office. If that's something that's possible and that's something you want to do, go for it. So cost-wise, it depends on what's going to be the best choice for you. Is going to depend on what kind of program you want to do, where you want to go, and what courses you need to take, and whether you're in or out of state. So if you're in state, an exchange program might be a really great fit, because an exchange program means you are going to go to a different university and a student is going to come to your place. You both pay your university the normal fee that you would pay, and then you switch places. So you'd be paying the exact same thing you're going to pay for a semester at Charlotte as you are to go to the other university. The difference is going to be the cost to get there and the cost of living in whatever city or country you're in. So that would be something to look at. But in that case, if you're an in-state student, you're still going to pay for food, you're still going to pay for housing. Here, you're going to go there. So then your big difference is cost of living and travel to get there. If you are out of state, it might actually be cheaper not to do an exchange program, but to do an affiliate program or to do a direct placement. or I did my semester abroad through University Studies Abroad Consortium, which was I believe they are a nonprofit organization, so they keep their costs relatively low. And I did an intensive language program, which meant that I took 4 semesters of Spanish in 1 semester, just 1 month for each course. That was the only course I took at that month. So there's a lot of different things out there. You can meet with the study abroad office. They'll give you a lot more information. And then I see the question about, did it give me skills to use in the rest of my academic professional career? And I would say, absolutely. If you're going to study abroad, you're going to need to learn to be flexible, because you are now, and you're going to need to learn to be humble too, because you are coming now as the reputation Americans have abroad is not always great. We kind of come across, other countries think we're bossy and we plow ahead and we just do our own thing. You got to learn to, that's not me, but I need to make sure I'm not coming across that way. I need to make sure I'm respecting the culture that I'm in, that I am trying to learn from that culture, that I am trying to learn from being here. The perspective I try to take when I travel abroad is I try to look around at the people around me and I see, how are they doing things? How are they interacting? How does traffic work? How do they interact with each other? How do they interact when they go to the store? How do you take the metro? How do you cross the street? All of these things. And I just try to do as much as I can to follow that flow and become a part of that. And that really helps me to learn how other people live, helps me navigate too, when I'm trying to figure out where to go. If you're going to learn a language, that's an absolutely useful skill. I interpret in our pro bono clinics sometimes. That's something I wouldn't have had the opportunity or the skills to do had I not studied abroad in Chile. It also just gives you a better understanding of experiences people might be going through. So when I was in Chile, I traveled for the weekend to Argentina, came back, and I was covered in hives. I have no idea where it came from. We still don't know what kind of thing I was reacting to. And this was within my first month or so. And I didn't speak enough Spanish to go to the doctor by myself. So I'm going to the doctor with my host mom, who speaks some English, and I speak some Spanish. And we're trying to communicate together to figure out, what kind of doctor do I need to see? Who can see me? How do I get an appointment? How is this going to cost? What is this going to cost? What is wrong with me? And it was a very humbling and scary experience, because I wasn't able to understand what the doctor was saying or my host mom was saying to the doctor. So I didn't know for sure that what I felt needed to be said was being said. I didn't necessarily understand what the doctor was saying. So some things lost in translation, were they not? I don't know. So that gives me a lot more empathy when I am the interpreter or the clinician, student clinician, working with patients who don't understand me. How would I have wanted to be treated? How was I treated? What was that experience like? How can that inform how I interact with people? So you will learn far and away from your own experiences, just different things. It all goes back to that: challenge yourself, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, go do it. It's going to help you, whether that's a direct translation of, I learned this skill and that skill I'm going to use exactly the same way here, probably not. Did I learn this skill? Did I challenge myself? Did I learn that I'm flexible? Did I learn that I'm adaptable? Did I learn how to do those things? That is going to apply directly academically in whatever you choose to do for your studies and in your professional career and just in the rest of your life as you interact with people.
And I will tell you, from being the diversity, equity, inclusion person in our office, that study abroad, things like this, experiences, you can add them on your resume as a diversity initiative. Like, you learn so much about working with diverse people. Maybe you pick up another language while you're there. So I know that diversity, I've gotten a lot of questions lately about how to include diversity in your resume. How do you find that diversity that you can put on your resume? So study abroad is definitely a way to do that. And like Gabby said, she has gained so many great skills and things that she uses today, and it's just been so helpful. So if you're thinking about studying abroad, I would definitely encourage you. I put a link in the chat to find out more about it, and specifically what Gabby was mentioning about financing it and scholarships. So it's linked there. So if you're thinking about it, reach out to them and see if that's something that you could do. All right, we're ending on the last few minutes. So if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat. But I think we've covered a lot of great information, and Gabby's been so great, and she will share her PowerPoint presentation with me. And I know a few of you have already direct messaged me, but if you would like me to send you the link to this video personally through email, just direct message me and give me your email address, and do the same for the PowerPoint if you would like that. But any last questions? Oh, there's a new message. Okay, that was for email. All right. If there's no other questions, Gabby has been so great that she has also provided her contact and also her colleagues' contact. So reach out to them personally if you have more specific questions. But Gabby, thank you so much for all this great information. And students, thank you so much for asking such great questions. We really appreciate you being here with us today and giving back. So thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you for having me. Everybody have a great day.
Bye, everyone.